Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to today's The Hindu News Analysis. In today's news analysis, we'll be discussing about 5 important news articles covered in the Hindu newspaper today. Coming to the first article, Restore April Status Along LAC, India. India has firmly conveyed its demand to China for restoring the status quo as existed in April along the border during the senior military commander talks on Saturday, the sources said. So, as we all know, from the last couple of months, issues were happening between India and China across the LAC. The areas across the LAC where the issues were happening were mainly in Ladakh and in Sikkim. In Ladakh, the areas were Pangong So Lake, Galvan Nala, and Demchok. And coming to Sikkim, the area where the issue is happening is Nakula Pass, which is at the northern border of Sikkim. The Ministry of External Affairs also said that the talks were held in a cordial and positive atmosphere, and both sides will continue the military and diplomatic engagements to resolve the situation. Although the talks remained inconclusive, but each sides put their own issues, which would be conveyed to respective governments and taken up in the subsequent meetings. So, what is the issue conveyed by China here? So, Chinese raised objections to India's infrastructure development. So, what infrastructure is India developing there? We all know that recently India was building a road near the border. The name of the road is DBO road. DBO stands for Daulat Beg Oldi Road. So because of the construction of the infrastructure in the Indian areas, the Chinese are having some concerns. But we should also keep in mind that the Chinese are also have ramped up the infrastructure in the Chinese area of the border. Also, India has complete rights to construct the infrastructure in Indian side of the border, right? So it was conveyed that infrastructure development would go on in the Indian territory, and the Chinese had already developed the infrastructure on its side. So anyway, the present talks were held at Chushul Moldo region. So this is the region along the India-China border. So you just have to remember this from the prelims perspective. If they ask Chushul Moldo region is related, is a area between which all countries? So the answer would be India and China. So here, a timeline of the ongoing standoff between India and China along the line of actual control is also given. So May 5th, it started in May 5th when Indian and Chinese troops scuffled at Pangong So Lake in Ladakh. Then in May 9th, clashes erupted between troops at Nakula Pass in northern Sikkim. Then on May 14th, Army Chief makes statements on the clashes, and there was aggressive behavior on both sides. So on May 18th, China accuses India of trespassing uh, and illegal works across the LAC. And May 21st, again, Minister of External Affairs says Chinese troops are hindering normal patrols. Then in May 27, China says the situation is stable and controllable. And June 2nd, June 5th, June 6th, there were talks between India and China. So this is the timeline which is happening. This timeline you don't have to you just have to know, but you don't have to worry it. You don't have to remember it from the prelims perspective, and also you can just leave it after reading it. Coming to the next article, editorial of the day: profit, not profiteering. So this is regarding the uh, decision by the states to control the payment, the charges which are put up by the private hospitals for treatment of COVID-19. So the move by certain states to regulate hospital fees charged in the private sector for COVID care, it is a right step, right? Because there were reports about exorbitant bills being raised in the private sector for hospital care of persons who tested positive for COVID-19. A few states decided to get involved, rightly so, and set a cap on the tariff that can be charged by the private hospitals. So, which all are the states which has interfered here? Here it is. Maharashtra was the first state to fix a tariff, followed by Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. So now the why the private sector got involved now? So for the initial part of the epidemic, it was the state that was providing most of the primary. It was the primary testing agent as well as the caregiver for all the COVID-19 cases. But as the number of cases increased, Naturally, calling all hands of the to the deck meant the significant involvement of the private sector also. But there were many issues. For example, there were even the private sector even charged up to 7 lakh rupees for a minimum 14-day period of hospitalization, even for mildly symptomatic or asymptomatic patients. So in case of asymptomatic patients also, the charges went up to 7 lakh for hospitalization. So you can think about the charges which have been given to ICU patients and all. That will be too much, right? So this is the issue, and this is where the state governments have rightly involved itself. So the state intervention could not have been delayed any further due to this exorbitant prices charged by the private hospitals. So further way forward is further watchfulness should continue on the part of the state. Also staying alive to the hardships of its people, it must ensure that the harsh times are not further exacerbated by profiteering. So this kind of a profiteering should not be happening from the private sector. So definitely there should be some profit for the operations of the private sector to continue. Some profit should be there, but profit should not be shifted to profiteering. So that is what this editorial talks about. Coming to the next article, again, this is related to the same topic regarding the private sector's involvement in the COVID 19 pandemic. So, paging the private sector in the COVID fight. Managing the epidemic and ensuring a full complement of healthcare will require extraordinary resources and investment. This unprecedented crisis has highlighted the critical need to mobilize all the available resources in the public sector and the private sector in particular. So, as we all know, the cases of COVID 19 are increasing day by day. Like in the last 2 days, the number of cases were more than 10,000 per day. In 24 hours, there were 10,000 cases, and the total cases have increased to around 2,50,000 and all, right? So, because of this unprecedented crisis, there is a need to use all the resources available in both public sector as well as the private sector in healthcare, right? However, the current strategies to involve the private sector in combating the infectious disease are shrouded in ambiguity. So there are many confusions regarding the involvement of private sector. So one of that confusion we have seen in the previous editorial, that is the exorbitant charges, the prices charged by the private sector. There are no clear policy guidelines to use private sector resources that could complement public sector efforts and how the payments for their services could be made. So these are some of the issues which are there with the private sector. Also, there is a need to formulate a stable policy based strategy to get the private sector on board. Also, recently, as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, there was a recent package announced for the health sector, and it was around 2.1 lakh crore, right? So it envisions the strengthening the health infrastructure in the immediate future. This is an opportunity to bring in structural changes in the health sector to rejuvenate the partnership with private sector. So as of now, what is happening is public sector is operating in their own area and private sector is operating in their own area in the health sector, right? So now this pandemic is providing a chance to ensure partnerships between both public and the private sector. There should be more partnership, right? So more PPP should come between private and public sector. So the article also discusses about certain areas where public and private sector can bring in partnership together to effectively handle the COVID pandemic. So one of those is in the laboratory services. So despite the government's trying to scale up testing capacity in the country, there is still a long way to go for mass scale testing. So here in to provide mass scale testing, private sector can be robbed in, and a proper private and public partnership can ensure that mass testing happens in the country. So that is one area where public sector can be robbed in. The second area where public sector can be robbed in is in the hospital infrastructure. Hospitalization of COVID 19 cases cannot be restricted to hospitals in the major cities alone, right? Because COVID is spreading throughout the country, even going to rural areas, tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. So it is not just sufficient to have good hospitals at the main cities only. So improving the infrastructure and capacity in tier 2 and tier 3 cities in collaboration with the private sector is very critical. So here the government has taken the right step to announce a viability gap funding of 30%. So what is this viability gap funding of VGF? VGF is a funding given by the by the government to the private sector to ensure that the private sector also gets some profit, because they are operating in tier 3 and tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So the profit which they get is less, right? Not only that, some of them can go even in the losses also. So in order to avoid any losses to the private sector while providing these kind of services, the viability gap funding is being used. So the same viability gap funding, it has also been used in another scheme. If you can remember it, it was in the Udan scheme, right? Ude Desh ke Aam Nagarik. It was a scheme in the aviation sector to ensure regional connectivity through flights, right? So here also, when flights are operating in the like regional airports where the traffic is very less, right? Where the traffic is less, also the rates were subsidized to around 2500 for an hour trip also. So in that case also, in order to ensure that the private sector does not face losses, viability gap funding has been used. So here, using VGF, we can ensure that hospitalization and hospital infrastructure can be given to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Also, another area where the private sector can be involved is the supply chain. There is an upsurge in the demand for test kits, ventilators, and other biomedical supplies, and it cannot be met by the current manufacturers or supply chain sources alone. So here there is a need to bring in the private sector, and we should be able to, the government should approve and grant a license for production, which includes patenting for the private sector. So if this patenting is given, then the private sector will be more interested to bring in innovations, right? So bring in innovations, and the government should regulate, oversee the process, so that the private sector does not involve in profiteering also, but there should be some profit to the private sector. So that is a third area where it can be involved. And the another area where the private sector could be involved is the in setting up a central intelligence system. An IT system with artificial intelligence capability should be the backbone of supporting all public and private sector efforts in combating COVID-19. So what should this intelligence system do? The intelligence system should seamlessly help in case identification, contact tracing, managing a telehealth center, generating e-vouchers, authorizing tests, managing referrals for isolation and hospitalization in the private sector, payment, follow-up, etc. So a lot of automation, identification and all can be done using this central intelligence system based on artificial intelligence. Also, in order to improve, in order to set up this, whom should be clear, like whom should we ask for? The IT behemoths, the IT companies in India should be roped in to configure an integrated system to detect any unusual pattern in terms of increase in numbers. So we all know that India has a good base for the IT sector, right? For areas like Bangalore and all, they are very good in IT sector. There are, like, India is a software exporting country also. So this strength of India should be utilized in order to ensure that a central intelligence system is created. The resources dedicated to fighting the COVID 19 pandemic have the potential to create a good health infrastructure and strengthen the health systems eventually. So, this is in the long term. Even though we are just trying to ramp up the infrastructure now, it will benefit the country in the long term also, right? So, there should be a quick policy formulation to ensure that there is a proper public private partnership in the health sector, and ensure that we'll be able to fight the COVID pandemic in a better manner, coordinated manner, in a uh, with a proper partnership between private and the public sector. So that is what this article talks about. Coming to the next article, in Persian Gulf littoral, cooperative security is the key. So here the article is written by the former Vice President of India, Hamid Ansari. So here the article talks about mostly the politics which is happening in the Persian Gulf, the countries around the Persian Gulf. So we won't be focusing on the political issues which is happening, like the internal issues which is happening in among the countries in the Persian Gulf, but we'll be focusing only on the UPSC related facts. Some international institutions are being mentioned here, so we'll be focusing only on those aspects. So I won't be completely telling the editor, completely reading out the article, but focusing only on the UPSC related stuffs. So the article talks about the Persian Gulf. So in geography, you might have learned about the water body which is named as Persian Gulf, right? So if you have not seen it, please go through the atlas and see the area which is marked as water body which is marked as Persian Gulf. So the lands around it are shared by 8 countries. So this is very important because usually the countries bordering any water body is being asked in the UPSC examination. For example, in 2016 there was a question or whether a question on countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea. So there is a great chance that Persian Gulf can be asked, like the countries which are bordering the Persian Gulf can be asked. So there are 8 countries which are bordering the Persian Gulf. They are Bahrain, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates, UAE, and all these are members of the UN also. So there is a commonality of interest among them in being major producers of the crude oil and natural gas. So we all know that this area, the area around the Persian Gulf, are the major producers of crude oil and the natural gas, and thereby they contribute critically to the global economy and to their own prosperity. At the same time, turbulence have often characterized their inter-political relations. So here briefly, if we say that we know that there are many issues which is happening between the countries in the West Asia, right? So if we consider the Persian Gulf in particular, there are issues between countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, right? Also, there has been Iran revolution in the 1970s or so, and there has been Iraq war, Kuwait war was there, Iraq war was there. So this area is an area of turbulence, right? So there is no political stability in this area due to the increased conflicts between the regions of the country, regions of the Persian Gulf. So here there are some history regarding to Persian Gulf which is mentioned here. For 8 decades prior to 1970, so for 80 years, this body of water, that is the Persian Gulf, was a closely guarded British lake administered in good measure by the imperial civil servants from India. So when that era ended, regional players sought to assert themselves. So this is a new fact, right? It's like Indian civil servants, the civil servants from India belonging to the ICS. So they were actually in control of the Persian Gulf for 80 years before 1970 because it was under the British control. So after that, when this, so after the 1970s, then the regional players, that is the 8 countries which are bordering the Persian Gulf, they started to assert themselves, right? So this is the issue, and then comes the politics and all. So those things we don't have to bother about much. But from the prelims perspective, one international organization is being mentioned here, that is the Gulf Cooperation Council. So this is a very important topic from the prelims perspective, because international organizations are being continuously asked in the prelims for like consecutive prelims. So here we have to see which all are the countries. You just have to worry, you just have to know which all are the countries which are there in the Gulf Cooperation Council, because there are only 6 countries in the Gulf Cooperation country. So I will tell an easy way to remember the countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council. So here we have already seen that the lands around the Persian Gulf is bordered by 8 countries, right? So out of these 8 countries, apart from 2 countries, the remaining countries are part of the GCC. So which all are the 2 countries which are not part of GCC? They are Iran and Iraq. So apart from Iran and Iraq, the other 6 countries form the GCC. So which are all those countries which comes under GCC? They are Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. So this is how you should be remembering both things. You will be remembering the countries bordering GC, bordering the Persian Gulf also, also the members of the GCC also. So in this manner, you'll be remembering both things, right? So and there is another international organization which is mentioned here, that is the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. So OPEC is an international intergovernmental organization of about 13 countries. So 13 countries, and these 13 countries are mainly the oil producing countries of the world. So since there are 13 countries, you don't have to by heart all the countries which are there in this organization, because it will be a hectic task and UPSC won't ask much about this. But you have to know what OPEC is. why OPEC was established. For example, OPEC was established by the oil producing countries in order to ensure that a coordinated efforts on the price of the oil, how much should be exported, how much they should be controlling, how much they should be producing, so that the countries which are producing oil get good returns on the production. For example, if one country starts producing a lot of oil, then definitely what happens, the supply of the oil in the world increases, right? So if the supply of the oil increases in the world, then uh, if the supply increases and the demand is constant, then the price of the oil will decline like anything. So so this OPEC has the duty to avoid such price crashes and all which happens in the global oil market. So that you can learn about OPEC. Also there's another international organization which is being mentioned here. It is the Arab League. So Arab League contains around 22 countries. So here also you don't have to by heart all the countries which are there, because 22 is like a huge number to by heart, and they may not ask it from the prelims perspective also. So just know that so there exists Arab League, there exists OPEC. Just know why they are existing, what are their mandates, and coming to GCC, try to remember the countries which are involved in GCC. So that much will be sufficient from the prelims perspective, and also go through the geography of the Persian Gulf. Okay, so coming to India, so this will be more important for UPSC mains perspective. That is India's ties with the countries of the Persian Gulf, right? So that will be more important from the mains perspective. So the bilateral relationship, economic and political, with the GCC has blossomed in the recent years. The governments are India friendly and Indian friendly and appreciate the benefits of a wide ranging relationship. So, this is well reflected in the bilateral trade of around $121 billion and remittances of 49 billion. $49 billion from a workforce of over 9 million. So this is a very important statistics you can use in the mains examination. So if there is a question regarding the India and the Gulf relations, then definitely you can use this statistics. Okay, bilateral trade, if you can remember, you can use it. But you can definitely remember the $50 billion, around $49 billion of the remittances which we are getting, and the 9 billion workforce. So 9 million stands for around 90 lakh. So we all know that around 90 lakh Indians are working in the Gulf countries. So this kind of a statistics you can just note it down so that you can use it in the mains, especially in the introduction. So if a question is there on introduction, question is there on India GCC relations, so you can definitely start with an introduction saying that India and GCC, Indian Gulf countries are having a very deep relations between each other, with a 9 billion workforce, 9 million workforce working in the Gulf countries, and India receiving a total remittance of around $49 billion. So if you are able to give an introduction in this manner, then definitely the evaluator will understand that you know some good statistics regarding this international relations, and you are more likely to fetch more marks in the mains examination also. So try to have a notebook where you will be quoting very important statistics. Okay, also, GCC suppliers account for around 34% of our crude imports, and national oil companies in Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi are partners in a 44 billion investment in the giant Ratnagiri oil refinery. So in the main answer, you can also mention about this Ratnagiri oil refinery, where cooperation is happening between India and countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE. So Abu Dhabi is of UAE, right? So in addition, Saudi's Aramco is reported to take a 20% stake in Reliance Oil to Chemicals business. So Saudi's Aramco. Aramco is a oil company of Saudi Arabia, right? So they are planning to buy stakes in the Reliance Limited also, Reliance business. So the relationship with Iran is also very important for India, right? So on account of its economical potential and geopolitical relevance. For example, India's connectivity to Afghanistan was mainly based on Iran. For example, Chabahar port was there. So Chabahar port was a uh, way to like avoid Pakistan to reach Afghanistan, because India's direct border with Afghanistan falls in the POK as of now. So as of now, in practice, India doesn't have a land border with Afghanistan. So India has to take the maritime route. Like Pakistan anyway won't allow, will create issues with India connecting to Afghanistan. So India plan to take a maritime route through the Arabian Sea towards Chabahar port in Iran, and through Iran, the land border connects to Afghanistan. So Iran is very important for India in India's connectivity to both Afghanistan as well as the Central Asian countries. So we all know that there are Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and even towards north, if we go to the East European countries and even Russia. So Iran is a very important player in ensuring India's connectivity to all these areas. So which all are these areas? Afghanistan, Central Asian nations, East European countries, and even up to Russia. So there is another concept called the International North-South Transport Corridor. So this Iran is also a major player in ensuring the success of International North-South Transport Corridor, or INSTC. Okay, so this is the relevance of Iran also. So India has eschewed involvement in local or regional disputes. So that is, India has avoided involving itself into any of these disputes. India has maintained a good relationship with Saudi Arabia also. India has maintained a good relationship with Iran also. Though these both of these countries are fighting against each other. So they necessitate in totality peace and regional stability. So that is the need of the hour. Freedom of navigation and access to regions, markets in terms of trade, technology, and manpower resources. Indian interests would be best served if the stability is ensured to cooperative security, since the alternative of competitive security operations cannot ensure durable peace. So here the author is telling about two types of security. One is cooperative security and the other one is competitive security. So this keywords can also be used in your mains answer writing. So why cooperative security is a better alternative to competitive security? For example, China is actually practicing something called competitive security, right? So that is creating issues, that is causing issues of revisionism, right? Whereas cooperative security will be good for all countries in the world, right? So the author says that the need of the hour is cooperative security rather than competitive security. Now here I have given you a map about this Persian Gulf. So you can see that this area marked on the right side of this green marked area, that is the Persian Gulf, right? So the countries which are bordering the Persian Gulf, you can see includes Iran and Iraq also. But these green marked countries are members of the GCC. So the members of GCC are marked in green color here. They are Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman. So other two countries which are bordering the Persian Gulf are Iran and Iraq also, but they are not members of the I mean, they are not members of the GCC. So here you have to, from the geographical perspective, you have to learn Persian Gulf, the countries bordering it. Also you have to see the this thing also, like the gulfs which are present here. For example, there's a Gulf of Oman near the country called Oman. Also there is a Strait of Hormuz also. So these straits and gulfs also become important from the prelims perspective, that you have to read by yourself. Coming to the next article, addressing the elephant in the room. So this is regarding the outrage which happened regarding the death of an elephant. So the news last week about a pregnant elephant having her mouth blown caused outrage on social media. While people are demonizing the farmer responsible for the incident, it is important to note that the elephant was an unintended target. Most of the crackers were aimed at wild boar that destroy small farmers' crop. A major failing of conservation in India is that the needs of the farmers and the wild animals do not go hand in hand. So that was the issue, and it was the narrative was misrepresented in the media also. So what are the problems with the narratives? So with the absence of large predators outside forest and huge availability of easily accessible food crops, animals like deer, monkeys, boar, and other species inevitably fill the space. That is, they come out of those wild areas and they try to enter into human habitats. In almost all the developed nations, these species are kept in control so that they don't destroy large crop areas. But in case of less developed countries, for example India, because of the absence of these policy controls, the local people take the matters into their own hands. Also, while the government has provision to declare overabundant animals as vermin, for example, the animals which destroy the crops and also, and if they are overabundant, too much in number, then the government has a provision of creating a term, declaring them as vermin and cull them under the Wildlife Protection Act. But it very rarely does this. So even though the government declares vermin, they don't kill those animals, and it rarely happens. So that is the reason why the numbers are increasing also. Also, Kerala has declared a wild boar as vermin, but very few has been killed over the years. So so this is the reason why wild boars try to attack the farmlands and destroy the crops. Given the widespread destruction of crops by these animals, farmers urgently need a safety net. So compensation schemes are one part of the solution. But in India, this is always a fraction of the market value of the crop, which is already precariously low. So the farmers usually don't get much money as compensation for destruction of the crops by wild animals. So what the farmers do, they do these kind of measures and take the things in their own hands. Poor farmers spend a lot of time navigating bureaucratic processes to get it, and there is no end to these processes. Second, this incident is far from new. So this incident is not a first thing which is happening anywhere in the country. The start of the monsoon is when animals move into human habitations more because of the presence of jackfruit and other crops of fruits. Like during monsoon season, the agriculture starts, right? So more food is available for the animals. Another problem with the narrative is that this incident groups all the human beings together. While some people are indeed overexploiting the planet, everyone is far from being equally culpable for the ecological disaster that we are now in. Modern developed urban humans are in fact disproportionately responsible, since the urban areas consumed infinitely more resources compared to the rural areas, right? So it is our greed that has destroyed vast tracts of the forest and thousands of elephants and other animals over the last few decades. So the poor farmer who has done this is much less responsible to the people in the urban areas, right? So the because it is for the urban areas that these farmers are mostly producing the agriculture products, right? Also, how do we make sure that the elephants don't die in this way, and two, how we reduce the negative human elephant interactions? So the first problem is relatively simpler to solve. We should control the population of wild boar to minimize the impact they have on farmers. Because the reason that the wild boars are more, that is the reason why farmers do these kind of stuffs, right? Putting crackers and pineapples and all. First, we should ensure that the number of wild boars is controlled. So boars are also classified as least concern, so they are not having any threat of extinction. So if they are causing the death of much more threatened species like elephants, that gives us all the more reason to control the numbers of wild boars. So already they are declared as vermin, so government should ensure that they are culled when there is an overlap. So coming to human animal interactions, there are many areas where overlap happens between human and animal settlements, right? So there's a mistaken assumption that a conflict is inevitable. But for example, in the case of elephants, only about 25% of the elephant range fall within the protected areas. So the other areas are not protected areas, and they overlap with the human settlements. So animals and people, particularly elephants, have always been interacting with each other, animals and people. While there have been always been problems, but most interactions are peaceful, and there's a deep cultural tolerance not found in other parts of the world. However, as animals and humans numbers grow and there's more and more pressure on the land and the resources, then the challenges of living together will also increase. So the main issue here is the resource crunch which is happening, right? So, while it is heartening to see everyone get upset about the death of the elephant, the hope is that there'll also be large scale protest about the large scale destruction of the environment. Because see, what happened with the death of an elephant is a symptom of a disease. So what is the actual disease which is happening? It is the large scale destruction of the environment which human beings are doing for their own greed, right? So if the disease is not treated, then there is no use of treating the symptoms. There is no use in the entire country coming together just to mourn the death of an elephant, because that is a symptom of a larger problem, symptom of a larger disease, that is the environmental destruction and the climate change which is happening. Just by crying at a symptom, it's of no use. If the government is coming up with policies to ensure that environmental degradation does not happen, that should be done, right? So the disease should be treated, not the symptoms. If the disease is not there, there won't be any symptoms like this. So that is the main idea we should be getting from this incident. There is no use if like celebrities just uh, they just cry for this one incident and just they keep mum on the environmental wider environmental issues which is happening, right? So, what can be done now? So, what is the way forward? So, the National Board of Wildlife and the Forest Advisory Committees, they should be taking more responsibilities to ensure the environmental protection, right? So, recently the government has even allocated a coal mine inside an elephant reserve in Assam, and so that was recently cleared. Also, the environmental clearances are easing up and opening up forest for destruction to boost a post-COVID economy. So the government itself is actually easing up the environmental clearance, and the environment is being increasingly destroyed. So when the environment is increasingly destroyed, the forests are being cleared, then there are no resources in the forest areas, right? So the animals will definitely come out, and these kind of man animal conflict are bound to happen again and again, right? So it is the role of the government to ensure that the environment is protected and such issues does not happen in future. Coming to the other articles, in page 10, China's internal pressures are driving Xi's tough stance of border. So this is an interview with a person. So here you can get new perspectives on why China is trying to create more border issues with India. You can read it in page 10. Also, Brazil stops publishing running total of COVID-19 cases and deaths. So you all know that the COVID cases are increasing in Brazil day by day, but the Brazil has decided against transparency and they stopped publishing the running of the total COVID-19 cases and the deaths. So this is a very bad situation to control the pandemic, right? So this also you can read in page 14. So that's all for today's news video. I hope you like the video. Please press the like button, subscribe to the channel and share the video with your friends. Have a great day. Thank you.